Wine, Dine, Combine, where the world of wines unfold right before your eyes. Today we are at Wine Merchants, a specialized wine shop which deals with German and South African wines. And today with us is Ernst Ernie.
Thanks for the invitation.
Good afternoon, Ernie.
Very nice meeting, man.
So, thanks for joining us here. I'm sure that you had a good view of Malta last few days.
Yes, we had a great time so far.
Did you drink a lot of wine?
Well, yeah, it's a good place to drink a lot of wine. And great food here, I must say. Absolutely gorgeous.
You came from a family of more than 200 years history in winemaking. And what is the strongest philosophy that was trickled down to you?
Well, first, it's a typical family company, as we see in Germany or in France, As you said, it's 200 years in the family, but in our area where I am from, the Mosel region, that's a river, Mosel, and along the river are steep slopes where we grow Riesling, And Riesling is the major grape variety in our area for 200 years, So I would say we are pretty much specialists for Riesling, After 200 years we know, or we at least should know how to grow Riesling and do the best out of this grape variety, And so what's interesting is basically that our area is a northern climate area and Riesling is a cool climate grape, So the area is ideal to grow Riesling because you need a long ripening time for Riesling to produce this typical aromatics which Riesling shows, which is this what we call stone fruit aroma, like apple, peach, white peach, red peach, And yeah, that's and we still work very traditionally.
When you're saying you're championing Riesling, why Riesling? Why it's so magnificent, the Riesling grape? Why it's different than other grapes, grape varieties?
Very simple. Riesling is a very versatile grape, So if you look to Chardonnay, you have 2 or 3 options, oaked or unoaked, or possibly with mallow or without mallow. But Riesling is a grape variety you can do in so many different styles, You can make great dry style Rieslings, you can do medium dry or off dry Rieslings. We have in Germany a lot of predicate levels of fruity style Rieslings with a little bit of residual sweetness like a Cabernet, Wehlener, Auslese, and you can produce this grape variety in the noble sweet style. So, that is quite amazing, that you can produce with Riesling, with this grape variety, you can produce every style of winemaking, And that makes it super versatile, super interesting, but that is possibly also the handicap with Riesling, that it is very complex, and difficult for the average consumer to understand it, Pinot Grigio is a Pinot Grigio. Give me a Pinot Grigio, then they think that what they got, But with Riesling, you have to decide: do I want a lighter dry style or more heavier dry style? Do I want a light fruity, medium dry style, or do I want to have a noble sweet, dessert style wine,
wine.
And so, you have to know a bit about it, to decide it. But on the other hand, for the wine freaks, I said, Riesling is the greatest grape variety for wine freaks, to discover all these different styles. And then Riesling, like Pinot Noir, is a grape variety which reflects the soil perfectly. There's possibly no other grape like Riesling as Pinot Noir, which shows you the soil, pretty transparent, and that is also quite interesting. And if you want to discover all these layers, you can taste the whole day, and you still the whole life you can taste Riesling from different areas.
We will delve a bit into the soils just in a bit. So when you say that the great wines come from the great vineyards, what is something that modern winemakers don't know about the terroir, about how to cultivate wine before it reaches the cellar?
Well, as I said, Riesling is a great grape variety to reflect the right terroir, So, and it has to be the right terroir and the right microclimate. It's not all about terroir. If we talk about terroir nowadays, we talk about only the dirt, or it's limestone, or it's
The soil.
schist soil, and so on. But the terroir is a little bit more than the dirt, you know. The terroir is much more complex as only the dirt, you know. It is the soil, but it is also the microclimate. It is the exposure, inclination of the vineyard, you know. Elevation is very important. Drainage of the soil. This all forms the terroir. And here you have to get the right thing, you know. And I have been just talking about Riesling and it's a cool climate grape, you know. So in a very, very warm climate, hot climate, you know, you make lousy Riesling, you know. And the Riesling needs very poor soil. So in a very fruitful soil, you can't make fruitful soil, and warm climate you can't make it. It's a very, very uninteresting thing.
In an essence, to get the right analogy, the Riesling, you need to leave it fight, practice,
it has
train, and then develops itself.
Exactly.
Like a man.
It needs poor soil. It has to fight, you know, and if you have the right soil, so then you have to get the right fruit too, you know, because we know in the new world, you know, it's the winemakers are the superstars, you know, because it is all about winemakers, you know. But I mean, the best winemaker can't make great wine out of lousy fruit, you know? So I think you have to get the fruit first right, then you can make a great wine, you know. So you need both, you know. And if you have excellent fruit, you get everything done, you know, and the grapes perfectly in to the winery, you know, then the winemaker can make a great wine, you know, out of it.
Do you ever have a pressure of that, being a German, a face of German Riesling globally?
Well, I mean, 100 years ago, 120 years ago, you know, turn of the century, 1900, Riesling was the most expensive wine in the world, you know. More expensive, 2 to 3 times more expensive as first growth Prälat or Grand Cru Burgundies and so on, you know. There was, I mean, wine is also a bit of a fashion, you know. And there was a big fashion for Riesling. Great Rieslings was the most expensive wines in the world, you know. But then, you know, and then other wines have been becoming in fashion. But it is still, if you talk to the professionals, you know, to the top sommeliers, you know, or Jancis Robinson had been praising, one of the most famous wine journalists in the world, you know. She had been praising for 30 years, I know them more than for 30 years, I know Jancis. She had been praising always that Riesling belongs to one of the greatest grape variety in the world, you know. We had been working, I mean, in the early 90s, Riesling had been out of fashion. We had to work on the renaissance of Riesling, you know. But we can say now, worldwide, people, all the professionals, everybody, I mean, we don't have a problem with the top sommeliers and the journalists, you know. It is still a bit of a handicap with the consumer, because as I said beforehand, the consumer is a little bit unsafe. If they say Riesling, some people said, but Riesling is always sweet, you know. But then if people drink a fantastic dry Riesling, they said, oh, fuck, wow, that's just great. I didn't know that the Riesling can be that nice as a dry wine, you know. So there's still we have still to educate the consumer, you know. I mean, the top people, you know, we don't have to educate them. But I must say in the last 30 years, a lot of things change. And I mean, if you see now the reputation of Riesling worldwide, it doesn't matter where I'm going, people respect Riesling very much again. But it is also due to, I have to say this, due to all these young winemakers in the last 15, 20 years who all made a great job, you know. They said, no, I don't sell the grapes anymore to the big wineries. I make my own Riesling. I have my own view. I have my own passion and vision, you know. And there, in the last 20 years, there had been happening so much. And that's important, you know, the competition. As more, I don't have a problem with that. As more young winemakers make a great wine, explodes. Then that will be discovered in the world, you know. And that was really a development in Germany, which was fantastic and amazing, you know. We have never had so many talented young winemakers, you know, in Germany as we have nowadays.
And like that, you can see the versatility of the Riesling,
exactly.
How it will actually develop in different soils, different vineyards, different products,
it's amazing to discover all these things. And so I must say, you know, it is easy to discover Rieslings now with great young winemakers, you know, and price-quality relationship, you know. is also fantastic, you know.
If your ancestors are to walk into your vineyard today in your cellar, what would surprise them the most?
If I bring them to the cellar, well, we had been going back, you know, say 20 years. I rediscovered the winemaking of my great-great-grandfather. And that was a very, simple experience, you know. A very old customer of my great-grandfather visited me and said, "Oh, do you know that your great-grandfather from my father's side," because there's two estates came together. My mom inherited the wine estate and my father inherited the wine estate. They came together through marriage, but it's two different traditions. My mom's family comes from a very famous family, J.J. family, produced only the fruity style wines, you know, fruity style Kabinett, Spätes, also with a little bit residual sweetness. But my great-grandfather from my father's family produced only dry wine, you know. And so we didn't have these wines, these very old wines. We don't, from my great-grandfather, these dry wines I don't have in the cellar anymore. And this old gentleman and customer of my great-grandfather came with a bottle of 1947, a dry Riesling from a Grand Cru vineyard, Ürziger Würzgarten, you know? And I think it was this one, yeah, but from 1947. And I thought, oh yeah, now that is old, more than 50 years old, you know, 55 years old. And I said, yeah, dry wines, we always thought dry wines can't age so much, you know. But then weeks later I opened it and I tasted it, smelled it and said, what did this old man did, you know? That he, I have a glass here of a more than 50-year-old dry Riesling, and it's fantastic. And so I have been, you know, looking into the files and rediscovered the winemaking, the old winemaking of my great-grandfather. What he did, he fermented everything in big foudre barrels, you know, big foudre barrels, and so 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 liters, you know, on indigenous yeast, you know, natural yeast, you know, and then after fermentation, he left the wine 2 to 8 years in the barrel on the full yeast. Only sulfur, top it up, you know, for 2 years, 3 years, 8 years, you know. And then he bottled it without filtration and any fining, you know. In these days there was no technology, you know, so you had to wait, you know. I always say in the old days they had a lot of time, but no technology. Nowadays we have no time, but therefore a lot of technology, you know. And these wines are amazing how wonderful they can age, you know. This gives a wine great ageability. And after that, I had this bottle only because of this one bottle. I made the decision, I'd be going to the winemaker and said, Bernie, we have to change the winemaking for all our dry wines. We have to go back to the old traditional style of my great-grandfather. And so we invested in the last 20 years in oak barrels, big oak barrels again, you know. So that was an expensive investment. I think I spent 2.5 million euros only on barrels, you know, but big ones, you know, not the French barriques, you know, and they don't give oak. Here the idea is the micro-oxidation, you know, the long, very, very little micro-oxidation, which with the yeast contact, you know, that integrates the acidity into the complexity of the wine and makes absolutely beautiful, harmonious wine, which can age fantastically. And I think that is coming back to your question. If I show this, you know, to customers, you know, sommeliers and so, which we don't show. I mean, we don't have the capacity for private customers, you know, but for the trade, when I go to the cellar and we taste from the barrel, and I give him a taste, you know, of a barrel, and then I say, hey, what do you think? How old is it? Well, isn't it from last year? No, this is 8 years in the barrel. He can't believe it, you know. And that is the most amazing thing for people which I bring to the cellar.
So the ancestors would be mostly surprised that you kept the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, the old winemaking from my great-grandfather between 1880 and 1930. Why 1930? In the 1930, they invented filters and all this technology is end of the 1920s, you know. And so, but before that, they had no technology. The only thing, they had time. They've been waiting until the wine was finishing itself.
Patience.
Patient, exactly. Wine needs patience. If you want to make a great wine, you need a lot of patience, you know.
Did you ever, you were mentioning micro-oxidization. Did you ever experiment with Qvevri or with amphoras, with Riesling?
No, never been with, never experienced with Qvevri and amphora, because this is usually also in most wines which are produced in quarries or in amphoras and so are often these kind of natural wines, or orange wines, well, I'm not the biggest fan of these kind of wines, even if the people say, yeah, but we go back to the roots, as it was done in, say, 2,000 years ago, or whatever, that is the real roots. Yeah, that's true. I studied archaeology, Roman archaeology, that's true. The Romans didn't know barrels, they only know amphoras, and so they had no other choice to make wine in amphoras, That was not because they thought that
it was not a choice, it was what it is.
Yeah, that is what it is. And why did the amphora winemaking disappear so fast, Because after Caesar, who conquered France, the Celtic area, Gallia, the invention of barrels, or wooden baskets and so, came from the Celtic and Germanic people, And as soon the Romans came to Gallia, they saw, oh, these guys have barrels, They have vessels,
wooden vessels,
wooden vessels, And that would must be a good idea to make wine in there too. And then they suddenly saw, oh my God, the wine keep in the barrel much better than in the amphora. And then you have to see, in Roman times, the wine was very important also for the legionnaires, So they had to transport all the wine because the legionnaires had been paid in wine, oil, and wheat, So they had to transport all the wine from Italy, in amphoras on these lousy streets, all the way to Gallia, to Brittany, and so on. You can imagine how much breakage they had. And suddenly they could transport bigger quantities, so amphora was 60, 70 liters, And suddenly they had barrels of 200 liters, 250 liters. They could transport, and they have been flexible. They didn't break on all the. And then when they arrived in Brittany, they saw, oh, the wine is even better.
You could roll the barrel as well.
So from that point of view, this is for me such an argument. But I'm totally liberal. I think everybody should do whatever he likes, If he thinks this is the best wine in the world, he should do it, and try to make it better. That's it, So because I'm absolutely against that, to make everything equal, that everybody should do the same winemaking and so. No, that is the versatility also, and the beauty of wine, that you can have so many different styles with winemaking, and everybody can find his favorite wine.
The most steepest vineyards are in Mosel. So
yeah, that's true.
What it each year teach you about humility there? Because there is a lot of hard work involved, a lot of people's work, a lot of different soils involved, a lot of different. You're working with many vineyards, which all of them have different soils. So.
Yeah, well, first the Mosel. It's a beautiful area. It's a very narrow valley. The Mosel River had been winding itself, from the Vosges Mountains all the way into the Rhine River, and had been took the river 400 million years, to dig, the valley into the Slate Mountains of the Rhineland, we call it, So we have an elevation from the river to the top, It's an elevation from 100 meter to 400 meter, So it's a deep valley, and then you have the steep slopes, and that's true. We have the steepest vineyard in the Mosel, in the world. I own even 1 hectare in the steepest vineyard of the world. It's called Calmont, Bremmer Calmont, and Calmont is Latin. It comes from Roman time, where you see already we have wine growing since Roman times there, since 2,000 years, The oldest Roman press houses which had been found in Germany had been on the Mosel. So we are the oldest wine growing region in Germany, going back 2,000 years with the Romans when they came. And this Calmont, Caldus Montus, the hot hill, was, as the name already said, already planted in Roman time. This is insane, Steve, really. This thing is like this here, really like that. 130% steepness, It is insane if you work there. So, but that means also labor. These vineyards are super labor intense, We can't have machines there, the harvesters also. Everything had to be by hand. everything you have to schlep in there, you know, or to schlep out, you know.
And put it on your...
So yeah, it's that is the challenging part of it, you know. We all know nowadays, you know, labor, everything is more difficult to get labor, and people definitely don't want to do this kind of hard work. In summer, it can be hot, you know. And
this is a challenge as well.
Very challenging, but we in the winery have, and the Mosel, the Dr. Losen estate, we have 3 different soil types. Basically, it's all slate, you know, slate from Devonian time, 400 years old, and we have the typical slate soil is what we call the blue or gray slate, but then we have also red slate, which is oxidized blue slate by heat, by volcanic activity, and we have volcanic soil. We have one village, which is quite an exception, which is weathered red volcanic soil, you know, that is our 3 soil types, but the Mosel is pretty much slate, you know, because it's all the slate mountains, you know, and this slate gives a very nice mineral-driven character to the wine, because the slate has a high content of potassium, you know, and it's a very slow source, you know. It's only stones. In some vineyards, you go into the vineyard, you see only stones, no soil, only stones, you know, and that is a very slow source of potassium, and this potassium, as always said, gives this nice mineral-driven character to the Riesling. So from that point of view, it's very unique. This area is very unique. I would say, for all Riesling growing areas in Germany, and Germany is by far the largest Riesling producing country with 50% of the world production, you know. But we have in each 13 growing regions in Germany, we have Riesling. But I think the Mosel is possibly the most unique one because of this special slate soil. The slate soil gives the
high minerality in the wines.
High minerality, you know.
And do you have problem with the erosion?
No, that is the funny thing. I had so many visitors from all over the world, or friends, winemakers from everywhere, you know. And I know a winemaker from California. He had a winery, his own winery in New Zealand, Pyramid Valley. I mean, fantastic Pinot Noirs. And he did an internship with me, and that was '98. We had a lot of rain, you know, during the harvest. And he said, I can't believe it, you know. So much rain, you know, and the grapes are still perfect. They don't burst, they don't suck in the water, you know, and all the water drains away because, as I said, we have only 1 meter soil, topsoil, 60% is stones, and then the pure cliff start, you know, pure cliff, 1 meter soil, 6% stones, so that is like, you know, I mean, if it rains, it goes like through a train, you know, whoop, gone, you know, and therefore we don't have erosion. And that is supposed to be the only area that is so steep, which is not terraced. Everywhere in the world, if you have steep slopes,
yes,
that's terraced to protect from erosion. We don't need terraces, you know. That is always for specialists always fascinating. That God, that's so steep and you don't need terraces. No.
When I don't visit, I try not to read about it. I try to get it from the source. So
sure.
Questions like erosion,
right.
You know, I didn't know about it. How does Mosel blue slate differs from the Pfalz?
Yeah, well, from the Pfalz, we have a winery in the Pfalz, and you know, we have it also here in the shop. You know, we have Dr. Losen, which is producing only Riesling in the Mosel, but we have also a winery in the Pfalz, which is called Villa Wulf. You know, and here we concentrate on, sure, also Riesling. Riesling is important in every region, but we do also here Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, Pinot Noir, because this is a very long tradition, and not in the Mosel, but on the Rhine. We have more than 1,000 years of tradition on the Rhine for the Pinot varietals. Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris, Pinot Noir, Pinot Noir Rosé, sure, as Riesling. And Riesling is important too in the Pfalz, you know. But here we have different soil types. First, the Rhine River Valley is a much broader valley, very, very broad, you know. And the hills are more gentle slopes, you know, something like this, you know, not like this in the Mosel, you know. And so here we have more diverse soil types, you know. Here we have, in some areas, we have limestone, you have sandy stone, sandstone, you have black basalt pebbles in the Pechstein, so a much more diverse soil as in the Mosel. And the Mosel is pretty much all slate, you know. different color slate, but it's slate from Devonian time, brown slate, yellow slate, red slate, and gray slate and blue slate, but in the files we have a much more. So first, the riverbed, the old riverbed, that's pretty sandy soils, sure, from the old riverbed, sandy river gravels, As higher you come more towards the hills, Here we have then limestone, we have basalt, black basalt, all kind of mixture of different types of soil, Much more diverse. I mean, you can say in each village you have different diverse type.
Which is a beauty Burgundy. Out of it.
Yeah, it's also beauty, Like a bit like Burgundy,
So by the German classification, you have the vineyards in something which is actually parallel to the Grand Cru in France.
Yes, exactly, And we even here, the Mosel, with the Rheingau on the Rhine, we have the oldest vineyard classification map, which is from ours is from 1868, the Rheingau 1867, and that is nearly 50 years older than the Burgundy map, But it is the same system, a three-tier system. So in France and Burgundy, it's Grand Cru. The second is Premier Cru, and the third is Village, Here on our old map, it's the same three-tier system, and it's called first growth vineyard, second growth vineyard, and third growth vineyard, on this old map,
So the second growth would be the estate wine, and then
Village, and then beneath that is estate Riesling is like what you call in Burgundy, Bourgogne Blanc, Bourgogne Rouge, That is our estate Riesling. It says only Dr. Losen Riesling. So we still have this vineyard, for example, is over 100-year-olds on their own roots. No American rootstocks, on their own roots. Because this vineyard was never destroyed by phylloxera. And that is quite a huge rarity in Europe, to have still vineyards which are more than 100 years old. Our oldest vineyards are up to 150 years old. Original rootstock, planted middle of the 19th century. And never been destroyed by phylloxera, Because the soil, the slate soil, phylloxera can't live in the slate soil. It's not because we are super clever. It's the soil which
helps you up too.
Helps us,
You work with some of Germany's finest sites like Wehlener, Sonnenuhr.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you work with the Ürziger Würzgarten, and then you work with the Erdener Prälat.
Yes, exactly.
So they're all different soils, different types of vineyards. What do they say to you? I mean, how do you read these vineyards to produce the wines from?
It is, if we talk about terroir, or soil, or the vineyard, which you want to express in your wine, it is pretty simple, to express these different terroirs. Because you have to do the same winemaking. Everything has to be the same, from harvest, that means we use only 100% healthy grapes with our dry wines. From harvest, through the procedure, same pressing, same winemaking, management of the juice, and fermentation on indigenous yeast, fermented in barrels, the same size of barrels, If you do everything the same and you see a difference, then it can be only the terroir. Because there's so many different winemaking techniques now. If you would have the three wines, because you just mentioned Sonnenuhr as blue slate soil, Erdener Prälat is red slate soil, Würzgarten is red volcanic soil. If you want to see these three different types of soil in the wine, you have to, the procedure of winemaking with all three vineyards have to be exactly the same. You only can be sure that the wine shows the terroir, that you have to make all the wines you produce, from the Grand Cru vineyards, exactly the same, exactly the same. And then you see very dramatically the difference. And then you see that if you have a Würzgarten spice garden, it has some spice in it, it has some herbiness, it has some soiliness, comes down. Wehlener Sonnenuhr from the blue slate, very delicate, very fine, very much this delicate stone fruit aroma, always white peach. Wehlener Sonnenuhr is always white peach if you make it the right way, And the Prälat is very an unusual vineyard, because the microclimate is extreme there, And the red slate, here you have always, say, everything in once, You have the finesse of the slate as the power of the Würzgarten, together, you know. And then that is fascinating, you know.
Do you think that the wine making became simpler or more complex through the decades?
Well,
now you did answer part of it, but
to be frank, I mean, I know there's always this big thing, you know, especially if I'm in the US, you know. I remember that was 30 years ago. We had a tasting, and then that was famous Chardonnay producer, you know? And then the wine. I was very close friend to the vineyard manager, and he said, "Oh my God, we got a new winemaker, you know. He did an internship at Chateau Petrus, you know." And they all thought now God is coming, the winemaking
magic.
God, you know, the magic, you know. And he's making now these great wines, you know. And that is so something. I mean, winemaking, I tell you, is simple, you know. It's no rocket science. Sorry, you know. It is. Less is more, you know, as less you interfere. You only have to get everything right. You have to get the right fruit. That means you have to work hard in the vineyard, that you first get the base, and the fruit must be perfect, you know. Then the rest is easy, you know. Then do the step as I said, I rediscovered the winemaking of my great-grandfather. That means that is minimalistic, you know. But you have to work in a clean cellar, you know. You have to, all the steps has to be, I mean, you know. Precise, you know. But I don't need you don't need findings, you don't need this, you don't need that, you know. Because every wine starts to ferment naturally, you know. And leave it, you know, and that is patience. Give the wine the time, then it finds its own balance. But nowadays, with the bankers in their back, you know,
the rush is there.
Yeah, they said, no, we don't finance such a 5 years or 8 years in the barrel or something like that, you know. So, but it is this learning by doing, I must say, you know, learning by doing. I learned so much in the last 30 years, only to try it, you know. I even left wine because I saw it in an old winemaking book, which I found in the library of my grandfather, you know, a winemaking book from 1807, where they described that they kept Riesling from Rhine and Mosel 20 to 30 years in the barrel on their full years. When I read this, I thought, come on, they can keep white wine 20, 30 years in the barrel. I mean, you know, that must be all oxidized, medarized, or chariots, you know. But I took a barrel and asked my dad, can I have a barrel? He said, yes, no problem, do whatever you like, you know, and left it 27 years in the barrel, only to find out I thought it is totally oxidized. But that is the great thing on learning by doing. And suddenly, it's totally different. The wine is fantastic, you know. The wine is not oxidized, you know. Super complex, enormously fresh. We call it always our Benjamin Button wine. Every year when we open a bottle, it's
becomes
fresher.
Younger.
Yeah, it becomes younger. Now, isn't it? That is the fascinating thing. But therefore, that something like this had been totally forgotten. Nobody knows anymore how wine was made 200 years ago. I found it only in an old winemaker book, you know, from 1807, and I started again. And then nobody has the patience to wait 27 years, you know. And I'm even going further. This wine will be released, 81 will be released in 31 when the wine is 50 years old. So many people wait 50 years to release a bottle of wine. But this, I love this kind of thing. I love this so much. The only problem, you know, I have to live another 50 years, you know, because I have still so many ideas to experiment.
To wait and see the results.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to the young winemakers who are starting to grow Riesling? I mean, not only necessarily in Germany or...
Well, they first have to explore their site, you know? I mean, every winemaker, if you start new in the new world, we also started new in Oregon, you know? And so we have to look at the site and, you know, you get the figures. Is it a very warm site? Is it a very cool site? Then you have to get an idea. Is the site right? I mean, is it suitable for Riesling? It should be a poor soil. It should be rather belong to a kind of cool climate. But cool climate doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be cool in summer. It can be as hot in summer as you like. The only importance for Riesling is that after variation, you know, if the grapes getting ripe, you know, so latest in late August, though, that the temperature in the night will drop drastically, you know. So if the temperature in the night with Riesling stays 20, 25 degrees, you can't do it, you know. Leave it, do something else, you know, there, you know, or Shiraz or whatever, I don't know.
So you're growing wines in Germany, and in USA, and in Australia. What do you think of Malta as the wine drinking nation? coming here?
I'm not a specialist about Malta. I have been now here visiting here my importer, Thomas. No? Now I think it's the third or fourth time, you know, and I was always amazed, you know. It seems that people love drinking wine and they're open for all kind of wines, you know. Sometimes, you know, you're coming to a country, you know, which also produce their own wine, that they drink only their own wine. They're a little bit interested, but it seems to be a market. People here are very open to taste everything, you know, and they're open for new things and new, experiences, new grape varieties. I must say, I'm very, very positive.
Open-minded.
Open-minded, very open-minded, and I'm very positive.
Did you find a Maltese food? Did you try Maltese food with your wines? Something local dish?
Well, I mean, I know that rabbit is very, very popular here. I love rabbit. You know, that when I've heard, rabbit is a local dish, you know, I thought, all right, we have to get a rabbit dish, you know.
You can really with the rabbit stew, with rabbit and peas stew. You can really see it.
And it's this white meat, you know, and so from that point of view, we have a house down in Lugano, you know, in Ticino, and in Ticino, rabbit is also a national dish, you know, and so therefore we have often there, and it's a white meat, you know, that works very well also with white wine, you know, and so such a corn cru Riesling, dry, you know, I think it's fantastic with rabbit, you know.
When it comes to Riesling, I like to match it with the lamb.
No. With
the whole roast lamb.
Oh, wow.
And you take a nice good chunk of it, and it goes well with it.
But and then you have fish here. I mean, I must say, we have been in the last 4 days. We have been eating every evening. We have been eating fish. You know, well, that is the great thing. You have fresh fish here. You know, that's fantastic. You know, that is difficult where I live. You know. So that is always, you know, we had yesterday some oysters on the half shell. It's perfect with Riesling, with the acidity, you know. You have usually the lime also with oysters on the half shell. The acidity, Riesling has a high acidity, perfect, you know, like this minerally driven Chablis, you know, perfect with oysters on the half shell.
What is the worst or the most wrong pairing with Riesling that you tried?
Good question. Well, what always is, I mean, Riesling, dry Riesling, you know, with desserts is a disaster, you know. That doesn't work at all, you know. And so, but therefore, that Riesling is so versatile. You can have a local sweet Riesling, you know, and then it works, you know. So from that point of view, that is the great thing with Riesling. You always find a wine which can work with this dish, you know.
Because it's so versatile in development.
So that you find a style that works, you know.
So Ernie, thank you very much for being our guest today here at the lovely surrounding and beautiful atmosphere of wine merchants in Sliema. And thank you for your wines.
And thanks for the invitation.
How do you say in German? Prost?
Prost.
Prost.
Yeah.